You're listening to The Rational on Vancouver Coop-Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. Public affairs and analysis from a people of color perspective. Tonight, Gaza, Canada, international law, resistance, civil society, and the politics of breaking siege. Over the past week, members of our collective have been busy organizing a series of in-depth discussions on the Spring 2026 Global Samud Flotilla with returning Canadians. Today we connected with BC participant Sebastian Tow after being detained on the 2026 Global Samud Flotilla to discuss his experiences, his motivations for activism, and insights into the ongoing struggle for Palestinian rights. Programs like this do not come from corporate newsrooms or commercial media priorities. They exist because community radio exists, and because listeners continue to support spaces where independent public affairs broadcasting is still possible. At a time when much of mainstream media reduces Gaza to headlines, a spectacle, or military framing, these conversations ask different questions. Questions like, what does solidarity look like? What happens when civilians challenge state power directly? What is the role of international law during genocide? And why are independent flotillas still necessary? Joined by experts and fellow flotilla activists, the discussion explores international law, state accountability, and future steps for justice. This kind of long-form, community-rooted public affairs coverage is increasingly rare in corporate media. It exists because of independent media spaces like CFRO and programs like The Rational. We like to say we're not the national, we're the rational. For more than 20 years, our collective has created space for conversations that move between scholarship, activism, lived experience, and political analysis, especially voices and perspectives often excluded from mainstream broadcast spaces. These stories matter, not only because of what's happening in Gaza, but because of what these moments reveal about media, power, law, race, empire, and our collective responsibilities to one another. So stay with us.
In our home countries and as an organization together to create a court case to take Israel to court in International Criminal Court, and we will, and it will be one more knock on the pillar of apartheid that will fall in our generation.
Free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
Palestine will be free!
These olive groves have roots so deep, 70 centuries and more. They fed the fellahin who sought peace beneath their shade. My father's father worked this land before the time the lines were drawn. And distant declarations made the broad darkness of dawn. And hunger and suffering and slaughter and dread. Samud, Samud, la narhal, existence is resistance. Samud, Samud, la narhal, we will not leave this land. Samud, Samud, la narhal, existence is resistance. Samud, Samud, la narhal, we will not leave this land. My mother was a refugee, settlers came and burned the fields, until no longer could she feed her family. We lived for decades in a camp, a narrow strip along the coast, where desperation filled the days and hunger haunted every home, and thirst and malady and misery and tears. Samud la narha, existence is resistance. Samud la narha, we will not leave this land. Samud la narha, existence is resistant. Samud la narha, we will not leave this land. Now my children ask me why the watching world is standing by, while Israel creates famine as a weapon in their war. Food is used to bait a trap, unarmed the starving stumble in, desperately hoping to find aid, but all that they receive are bullet wounds and tank fire, infanticide and dust. Samud la narha, existence is resistance. Samud la narha, we will not leave this land. Samud la narha, existence is resistance. Samud la narha, we will not leave this land. We will not leave this land. We will not leave.
Today we are joined in discussion with Sebastian Tow, who's just returned to Vancouver after being detained on the 2026 Global Samud Flotilla, to discuss his experiences, his personal experiences, being abducted and tortured, what he witnessed done to others, what the Global Samud Flotilla and the survivors, activists will do now to prosecute Israel, and solidarity with Palestinian political prisoners, the current situation in Gaza and the West Bank. Joining him are his mother, Anita Wittenberg, and two former flotilla participants, Karen DeVito and John Turnbull, an international law scholar as well, Dr. Heidi Matthews, whose work examines the legal and political dimensions of the current moment.
Before we get started, really, do you think we can just do a really quick round of introductions so we all just a little bit more comfortable with each other before we get into, yeah?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sebastian Tow. I began my activism for Palestine 3 years ago at the beginning of the genocide when I was still in university. I was in my third year of university at the time. And I decided I'd apply for a general participant on the Global Samud Flotilla between last fall and this December, when I was reflecting on what I saw from the first Global Flotilla this past September and October. And yeah, I just got back from occupied Palestine a few days ago.
My name is Anita Wittenberg. I'm an actor and the mother of this young man. And I'm learning so much through him and through his activism and his sister and I, this week have been thrust into doing a lot of media that we weren't expecting, but obviously wanted to do on behalf of this organization. I have nothing but things to say about every single person I've encountered in the global community.
Karen, why don't you go next?
Oh, thank you. My interest began as an academic interest. Back in 2007-8, a group of scholars got together after a course on peacemaking and divided societies to write a collection of essays, introductory essays about unacknowledged atrocities in the 20th century. And we encountered censorship because no one would publish unless we took out the chapter on the Nakba, which was beautifully written. We finally got the book published in the UK. It became a textbook. It was big in South Africa. And that's what got me more interested. My mentor did not really want me to go on the first flotilla of joined in 2011. He said, "You will be brutalized and you will become back damaged." However, I was chosen to be one of the 12 people on the boat, Canadian boat to Gaza, and I went, and we'll talk about the details later. They don't matter at this moment, but we're really inspired by what has happened since. We had a lot of trepidation about the most recent Samud flotilla and the one just before, worried about the people on it because we know what happened. It has escalated. Let's just put it that way. So John and I are both involved in various activities around the resistance, including apartheid-free communities. So we do what we can. We're getting up in years. So thank you, Sebastian.
John?
Yes, and thank you, Sebastian. As Karen has pointed out, we're getting up in years, so our stories tend to be much longer, and we'll try to keep them short and succinct. I have 3 or 4 things I want to say about this particular flotilla, and we can get to those later. My background is magazine publishing and computer software in the area of documentation. I'm a member of Tech for Palestine, and like a lot of people who have come through this experience, I continue to work on it, obviously. I'm involved in a documentary film at the moment, which I can talk about later on. Oh, I should also say that I am a faithful retweeter of Heidi Matthews, who I think will say something about herself next.
Oh dear. I get that a lot, and I'm like, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's lovely to see everybody. My name is Heidi. I am a professor at Osgoode Hall Law School at York University, Toronto, and I teach international criminal law and co-direct the intensive program that we have on international and transnational law. I've, I guess, in one way or another, been involved in scholarship and, I guess, I'm not sure how to describe it, but I suppose activism engaged scholarship in one way or another since, well, I don't know, I guess since law school, so for a while. My first experience in Israel and Palestine was in 2010, which was very eye-opening. And so I'd say I've kind of intensified work in the field since then. My academic projects are on the genocide, colonial genocide in the Canadian context, and in the context of Palestine is a focus of mine. I'm co-editing a collection right now on gender governance in the context of the genocide in Gaza, as well as some other stuff, including reproductive violence and preventing births as a particular underlying act of genocide. I also teach a course, it's a new course that will link the former special rapporteur and I designed last year and started at Osgoode on international law and Israel-Palestine. And we're continuing, well, myself and another colleague are going to teach that course again this year. So we're very happy about that. I wouldn't say there's great support for that work within the university and the law school. I would say it's quite the opposite, but yeah, we continue. In the fall, I sailed in Tunisia on a vessel that was accompanying the Global Sumud. So I was in Tunis for about 10 days. I was there during the drone attacks on the two vessels. I was at the port when that happened, and then sailed for a bit as a legal observer on that vessel. And I've been working with the flotilla organizations. There are a few of them to collect testimony and assist the Legal Center for Palestine. I'm an advisor at the center on possible actions going forward.
Wow. Thank you all. I mean, what an amazing group of people with such depth of experience, actual experience on this. And we are really happy that you've taken the time to come and share with us. I guess I'd like to start by asking one of the obvious questions, and I'm sure, Sebastian, you'll get this. I'm sure Karen and John, you've gotten this, as well as Heidi. Yeah. So we'll start with Sebastian. What, Sebastian, was that motivation for you? What sort of took it over the edge for you when you were considering this? I'm sure you were considering it. It just didn't pop into your head. But what was it that took you over the edge in terms of, yeah, this is something that I'm prepared to? I mean, I'm sure that you did your own diligence, you knew what you were getting into, all of that. But what was it that, if you can think of, or maybe there's 2 or 3, instances that sort of led you to say, okay, I'm committed?
Well, I think in the broadest sense, my conviction and my motivation for organizing for Palestine in the last 3 years has really been motivated by a sense of strong moral discomfort in many different ways. I mean, I'm both a Canadian and American citizen, so I come from a line of settlers, both sides of my family, and the American side of my family, that legacy lives very strongly with me, in the sense that I spent a lot of time reading on the imperial history of the U.S. and it's always been something that enrages me. But when the genocide began, it was, I had read about Vietnam, I had read about East Timor, I had read about Iraq, but now I was living it. I was living, and when even very small demonstrations and teach-ins that we began to organize, even only a month after October 7th, was met with such resistance, because I was a student in the U.S. at the time, and such resistance not only from the administration, from peers, that it really woke me up to what the possible price for dissenting is, especially in America, and it woke me up to realize that this isn't just a news issue; it's something at the core of American empire. And I felt myself to be, I didn't want to be a pawn for my governments. I wanted to be actively working and dissenting if need be. And so that's one reason. And then, I think I'll close that statement, that response, with just saying as well, I think that it's not just a sense of my own place in a system of oppression and dispossession. I think, and I've realized this more and more over the last year, but especially in the last few days after being freed from detention in Israel, that, I think my motivation for joining the flotilla and for joining activism for Palestine has also been motivated by very primary feelings and very primary truth, which is that I think that human life, the best of our lives, is made up of simple things, of spending our time with loved ones and having the simple freedom to walk out in the street and not have to fear for our lives. And having had that taken away for 4 days in a way that I'd never experienced before, it made me realize when I came home that a certain part of my soul was left in the dungeons in Israel, because I realized that my life feels incomplete now, that I know that there's still people in Palestine who are languishing and not be able to experience the kind of freedom I'm experiencing right now the last few days. I got home, I got to hug my mom, I got to walk around in the streets that I love, and Palestinians, there's over 10,000, between 9,500 and 10,000 illegally detained Palestinian hostages at the moment we speak. And so many of them are children, thousands, and so many of them have been detained and tortured for so long. And to be born in Gaza as well is to be born into a prison where every day you walk out and you're not sure if you're going to be murdered in an airstrike or by a sniper. And I find it, in a very primal, immediate sense, I find it just despicable. I think that freedom I have is not shared by everyone. I think that's the best of how I can put it.
Sebastian, it must have been obviously really eye-opening. I'm just searching for words to try to understand the experience that you've gone through, but I also recognize that the experience you went through is something that is constant and daily for Palestinians. You unfortunately had a taste of that experience, but we all have been watching this for decades and decades, and this is why flotillas are so necessary and important. It's not really about getting the aid in as much as it is about raising the awareness of it. But while we're on that topic, if you feel comfortable, Sebastian, would you like to share with us some of what you went through as an individual, but then also some of what you witnessed with your partners, as well as anything else that you want to share along those lines?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I'll say as well, I mean, as soon as we got out of detention and we were in Istanbul, as many as us as we could, but myself, certainly, and all the other 12 other Canadian activists, we went straight to our embassies and gave every single detail we could bring to our minds of our testimony. So the testimony I'm giving to you now has already been given to the Canadian consulate in Turkey, and will be given to as many media and legal sources as possible. So yeah, last week, we were just southwest of Cyprus in international waters in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. We're about a day or two away from Gaza. And the night before we were attacked, we had received news among our boats that there was a Navy vessel spotted. It turned out to be, we think, a Turkish vessel, but that really woke us up and we started to prepare for the worst. And the next day, boats started to be attacked, and we lost contact with many. And so my boat, Last Dream, joined up with another boat from the Greek delegation, and we sailed as far as we could away from the fleet as the entire fleet split apart. In the afternoon, I looked down the horizon, and Belela, the other boat we were with, it's nowhere to be seen. And there was nothing for a while until there was a warship on the horizon, and surely enough, there was a speedboat, a Zodiac, coming towards us. And we had prepared for that moment for a long time, but of course, nothing prepares you for the emotional impact. And what I remember feeling in the first moments of interception was just rage and annoyance and aggravation, because not only were we carrying aid, but I had spent a month of my life helping to prepare that ship, and I knew all my comrades had been spending almost up to half a year preparing those ships. And so when the commandos came close, there was maybe 15 of them. More than half of them were pointing assault rifles at us as they came towards us in the water, and they screamed at us to surrender, to stop our engines, to raise our hands. And forced us to move to the front of the boat, which was quite dangerous because we were in open waters, high waves, and the sails were still open. I was designated as the speaker to interact with the commandos because we had decided amongst ourselves that we did not want to single out a captain because it was dangerous for them. So I had to argue with the commandos and repeat again and again that not only were we humanitarians and peaceful and traveling lawfully, but we had no captain, and I was the spokesperson, and this was very difficult. And the danger began when they tried to force me to close the sails, and I had no idea how to. So we had to try, and the deckhands tried to conceal their identities, and we fumbled our way to closing the sails under gunpoint. Then they had us take photos with our passports, again under gunpoint, and under gunpoint we were forced off of our boat and into a high-speed Zodiac. And they were remarkably careless with us. I remember looking over at my comrade who was sitting across from me in the boat, and one of the soldiers on a bumpy wave kind of fell over on him, and his assault rifle hit my comrade in the face, hit his chest, and the commandos sort of just chuckled and laughed. And so once we reached the prison ship, the warship that was converted into a prison ship, every one of us was taken aboard, up a rope ladder and into a door, and then forced down on our knees. And they took everything from me and took my shoes, and they had zip tied me. And then they forcefully took me down a corridor, which the warship was set up in such a way that was an open deck, and there was about 4 or 5 containers, shipping containers set up to make a kind of open air prison. And so I went down the long corridor between the shipping container and the edge of the ship, and I was continuously stripped of my things to nothing but a t-shirt, pants, and socks. And then they threw me down in front of a table. They were all masked, the entire group from interception all the way up to the prison ship. And like something out of a dark comedy, they asked me at the table when I was on my knees in front of them, they said, "Do you have any medication or medical needs?" And I kind of stumbled. I said, "Well, I don't know, no." And then immediately the prison guard picked me up, cut my zip tie, and then threw me into a dark shipping container where I was immediately kicked in the chest and beaten to the ground. And before that, I had been hearing the screams of my friends through the walls of the shipping container. And I could hear their bodies being thrown up against the shipping container walls. And so I was beaten to the ground in the dark, and I could see my friend in whatever light there was in the corner of the shipping container also being beaten. And I felt a boot clamp down on my neck and choke me, and then I was tasered repeatedly. And when I screamed at the torturer to lift his boot from my neck, he kicked me in the neck and then asked me if I was having fun, picked me up after tasering me again, and then kicked me out and beat me over the head as I was being thrown out the door. And that was done to every single participant. We had about 180 people on our prison ship alone, and the way it was set up was, it was perfectly clear to see that it was like someone had drawn out a design, which they did week before, of how do you get 180 people to go through, at the most minimal level, just a room of beating before they're set out into a prison. And that's what they did. The only entrance into the open air prison was through that shipping container, where we were all beaten by about 4 to 5 guards. And my case was mild. So my friend before me, his ribs were broken, his nose was broken. And then within that shipping container in the next 2 days, there was cases of anal rape with the ends of guns. There was over 10 cases of sexual assault. There was over 30 cases of broken and fractured ribs, broken noses. And the worst part was the psychological torture, because once I was cast out, into the open air prison, and I looked around, I got my bearings, I saw we were all under sniper watch, but I was overwhelmed with joy to see my friends. But as I looked around and my eyes adjusted, I realized everybody else was also beaten and battered like me, most of them worse, far worse. There was many elderly who had to be confined to a makeshift hospital area that the medics among us set up in one of the shipping containers, and many didn't come out for the next 2 days because they couldn't walk. It was horrible because the rest of that afternoon, and then later that night, and the next night after that, they processed the last abducted comrades, and we had to sit and listen while we heard their screams and their shouts for help. That was the worst part, was having to listen, and while one after one after one of my friends were thrown out of this torture chamber, and we all tried to embrace them and see what we could do to help. But as far as what we could do to help was stitch together some zip ties, some plastic bags for a makeshift cast, strip someone's shirt to help tie up broken bones, use pieces of bread for a cast. The only thing they gave us in 2 days was garbage bags full of stale bread and the occasional case of water. They had more than that. They had about 6 or 8 porta potties set up, but 6 of them were, they had 8 porta potties set up and 6 of them were zip tied shut. So there was only 2 available for all 180 of us. There was no toilet paper except for 4 rolls they gave us when we demanded some. And when we had a general assembly the next day in the courtyard to decide our demands, which was medical supplies, water, proper food, sanitary pads, period pads, and so on, and serious medical attention. What they did was they flooded the deck with cold water so we couldn't be outside. And then they came out in riot gear about 4 times through the next 2 days and shot us with rubber bullets and threw flashbangs at us and forced us to cram into a corner where all of us were under maybe 15 assault rifles directly pointed at us to try and scare us and to try to stop demanding things. And we had it's an understatement, we had incredibly brave people there. For instance, Margaret Connolly was on my boat, and I don't think 10 minutes went by when she didn't decide to scream at one of the guards that we need water, medical attention, and there is old people who are seriously injured and they need help. And she screamed at them, and they had no response. One of their responses was, they finally brought out cases of water and threw us our shoes, which were also drenched in water. But to do so, they came out with riot gear and shot us with rubber bullets. And then the last night we were there, we could hear in the middle of the night, they brought in the last detainees, and they were tortured far worse. A dear friend of mine had, I think, 2 ribs broken, kicked repeatedly in the back, and then, as a response to our continuous demands for water, they had drenched every detainee that night with water, so they came out soaked and gasping for breath. And then when they kicked them out by their pants, they would throw a case of water after them. So that is what I witnessed and what I experienced on the prison ship. The last moment, which was, I think, the worst for many of us, was the last day we were there. Enough of us had discerned that we were probably docked from looking at the sky. We tried to figure out where we were. None of us knew. We guessed maybe we were in Ashdod. Maybe they're going to deport us in Cyprus. We didn't know. But we all knew that the riot gear was coming soon, so we all sort of prepared ourselves, helped the sick and the weak and injured to try and get behind us on the line that they had. And then out they came, and they forced all 180 of us to line up and receive zip ties very tightly around our wrists, and then to kneel in the courtyard. And as all of 180 of us knelt, in a position where within 5 minutes, I mean, I myself, I couldn't feel the blood in my legs and my feet. They kept shouting at us repeatedly that if we stood up or if we moved, we'd be shot. And it was in the glaring sun. And I lost track of time, but we were in that position, I think, for maybe anywhere between an hour and 3 hours. And what they did to taunt us was they replayed a Zionist folk song over and over and over again on the loudspeakers on the boat. It was so constant, again and again and again and again and again. And every time they would pause it and sort of have it off for a minute to make us, I suppose, think that the ordeal might be over. Then they would play it again. And so once that was finally over, many of us couldn't walk. I myself, I was so drenched in sweat and I couldn't feel my feet that the guards had to drag me out. And it's far worse to imagine what happened to people over 70 on that boat, people who were, their ribs were broken, their backs were broken, and they had to kneel like that for 2 to 3 hours. And then we were dragged out, and as I was dragged off through the corridor and off the ship, I came out and looked around, and there was an assault rifle pointed at my face and a whole group of people standing on the docks, and someone shouted, "Welcome to Israel," as 2 men came and twisted my arms to a point where it almost felt like they were dislocating and dragged me to a tent. And most of us, luckily, I didn't have to go through it a second time, but most of us were beaten in that tent again. And then I was thrown among those who couldn't kneel anymore. And so I sort of lied down half on my side on the hard pavement for about another half an hour till they yelled at me to kneel again. And then they dragged us away and began to process us. And what was sickening was it was as if we were taken into a large convention center and we were taken through sort of customs in the port, and behind there was maybe 300, 400 tables. It was sort of like if you went to, I don't know, a cosplay event or something, or I don't know, some sort of big convention, and there was all these people, supposed clerks and lawyers sitting behind tables who were having a grand time. They were drinking their coffee and chatting to their friends and laughing and looking on their phones, and they looked bored and whatever. And the young guards in masks would drag us around, and every time they dragged us and sat us down at a different table, we would have to go on our knees first, and then they would put us at the chair. And I myself was dragged by the hair, by the scruff of the neck, by the back of my pants, by my arms twisted, and they all seemed to be having a grand time and a lot of fun. And they taunted me as much as they could. And when they sat me down with the deportation officer, it's who I presume it was, they had a translator, and the whole time I had been demanding to every person there, I would look them in the eye and I would say, "I'm a humanitarian. I was traveling lawfully in international waters. You abducted me and tortured me for 2 days, and I want to see my lawyer and speak to my consulate right now." And they, many responses, but eventually I actually did see an Adala lawyer who came and was allowed to meet with me for 5 minutes in front of the translator and the deportation officer. And when I gave her my testimony and explained and just vomited out a word, an assembly of words explaining as much of the violence I witnessed as possible, she said, "Okay, now you can try and give them that testimony," and they wouldn't listen. And I stared the translator in the eye, and I called him a Nazi, and he couldn't look me back in the eye after a while. And he got up and he walked around, and he seemed very uncomfortable because he told me that what I was saying to him then, I was explaining what had happened on the ship. I was saying, "You tortured, you raped my friends." He wouldn't listen. He would say, "This is off the record. This is off the record. Do you want to be deported home or not?" After that, I was dragged to another tent by two young guards in masks, and I was forced to strip completely. And they looked at me there for a little while and tried to taunt me while I was standing completely naked in front of them. And after I mouthed off to them a bit too much, they tied my hands together so strongly with zip tie that I began to lose all sensation in my hands, and I still feel numb in these fingers. And they took us down to a corner where they knelt us down again. And then finally, after maybe 40 minutes, they severed my zip tie and they handcuffed all of us in a train around the wrists and around the ankles. And they put us on prison buses. And there was some comrades, one on my prison bus who the handcuffs were so tight, he was close to, and he was very brave, but he was close to yelling and crying the entire time because his hands were going black. Once they'd taken us to Ketziad prison, it was yet another nearly 24-hour, or what felt like 24 hours of, but I suppose was about 12 hours in the middle of the night of being psychologically tortured. So they would bring us around, as well as physically tortured, but mainly most of us, it was a big show of bringing us around to different cells. And they would have us stand in a cell that was made for about 2 people and have 18 of us crammed in there for maybe 15 minutes and not come back. And then suddenly they would burst in the door and sick dogs on us and things, and then make us walk out in a line again in a way of trying to keep us continuously uncertain of what would happen next. They took me to a chamber where I saw my comrades kneeling down towards the wall, and they asked me to strip completely naked again, and then we were all forced to put on prison uniforms. And when we were taken to each different cell, there was some people who actually did have dogs sicked on them. One comrade has his face bitten. Some people were taken off into corners and beaten. And eventually, most of us, and I was only with the men at that point, and most of us, about 100 of us, were stuffed into a large outdoor cage for detainees. And it was 2 layers of razor wire. So if you leaned up against it, you'd get cut. And there was about 100 of us stuffed in there. And what they tried to do next was they would take out one of us out individually and try and get us to sign a paper saying that we illegally entered a lawful NATO blockade or something. And they tried to get us to sign blank papers and things. And it took so long, and we were all so exhausted and on edge that all of us at a certain point, it became a protest, and we all just said, F you, take us to our lawyers. And when we did that, they'd make a huge show of force, and they would call us out individually one by one. And if someone said, no, take me to my lawyer, I'm not signing, they'd grab them by the hair, by the neck, or by the pants, or by the arms, and drag them away. We didn't know where, as if to say, we're going to take them away and torture this person. That's what you get. And about halfway into that, some of the guards left for a minute and then came back, and about maybe 8 or 12 guards in complex riot gear with large assault rifles were surrounding Ben-Gvir. And he came to our cage and looked in, and it took me a moment to realize, but he looked me in the eye, and I looked at him back, and I sort of stared him down, and then I realized, oh my goodness, it's Ben-Gvir. And before he had a chance to say anything, we all started whistling Bella Ciao, the anti-fascist song, and that pissed him off. And so he started trying to say something, and someone said, free, free, and we all shouted Palestine. He looked pretty disappointed, and then he walked away with his whole outfit. Which was also sickening too, is it looked like someone, like maybe his granddaughter, a young girl, maybe in her late teens, was there, and she was taking selfies right by the cage. And imagine between 80 and 100 men, most of them beaten and bloodied, many of them old, sitting 2 cramped together in a razor wire cage with dogs and riot gear surrounding them and taking selfies in front of that. So after that happened, my name was called, and I looked over the paper, and it was, I didn't want to sign it. And I told them, take me to my lawyer. And so they dragged me away and set me down on my knees in a stress position on the hard pavement for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then they dragged me away yet again. And finally, they took us to a chamber in a large outdoor cell complex, where they then instructed me, I was in the last cell, they instructed me to pick up a mattress and a blanket and to go into a sleeping chamber. There was a little bit of water in a water dispenser there, and there was some packaged bread, but most of us we all used the water to give to the elderly. There was one man who was in my Greek delegation who I trained with in Athens who he was beaten so badly. He's a hero because I didn't know how he must have been in such monstrous pain the entire time because he couldn't even sleep on the hardwood floors on the shipping containers. It pained him so much. He was about over the age of 70. As immediately when we got to Istanbul, he was put in a wheelchair and taken to the hospital, of course, but he was in that sleeping cell with me. And so we gave the water to him and tried to help him. And we demanded medical aid to no avail. And the guards continued to taunt us. And there was a TV in the corner that was showing supposed footage of, I don't know, October 7th or something. And there was a large poster in the corner beside it. It was a photo of Gaza and rubble, and it said Gaza now under it. Yeah, the guards all seemed to be having the time of their life. It sort of ranged from sadistic mocking to kind of vague boredom and curiosity. Many of the young guards who came to take off our shackles tried to ask us where we were from. There was a continuous sort of good cop, bad cop routine. And so the next day, or 3 hours later, really, once we had tried to get some sleep, they ushered us out under rifles and marched us all to a line to call us by name individually, and then they would force us down individually down a corridor, yet again by the neck or by the arms. And I was taken alone to outside where the dogs were barking and so on. And there was a prison van there that they stuffed me in with 2 comrades from Turkey. And then they closed the door on us. It was a hot, stuffy, claustrophobic van with the only ventilation being plexiglass holes in the front where the guards could look behind us who were driving and see us. And before we left, because we didn't know what was happening at the time, but they were loading up all the prison vans and the buses to drive us all to the airport. But we had no idea what was going on. And the only time the door was opened was when we were sitting waiting there, and some man with sunglasses accompanied by an Israeli guard took some videos and photos of us, of the 3 of us chained up there in the prison van, while the guard kept his assault rifle trained on us. And then they shut the van again. And about 5 to 6 hours later of riding through the desert, we had no idea what was going to happen. I was thinking in my mind, I was trying to be as calm as I could, but after the last 4 days, I'd realized that I had no power to discern what was going to happen next. And it was a few options, as I was saying to myself, well, they could be taking us to our consulate, they could be taking us to our lawyer, they could be taking us to another prison, they could be taking us to the middle of the desert to do some horrific thing to us or to kill us. I had no idea. Or the best option was they'd be taking us to the airport, which is where we wound up. And when we got to the airport, my experience was they finally opened the door after hours of us sitting on in front of the airport. And once we sort of limped out gasping, we noticed, even though the guards surrounded us on our way through the airport and escorted us to the tarmac, they didn't do it forcefully because there was onlookers around. There was, I don't know, Israeli citizens at the airport. And so they made a sort of a show of trying to look nice, kind to us, which was odd. And we walked down to the tarmac. I still didn't know what was going on. And once I got in the plane, I looked down and I saw so many of my friends and comrades, and I realized what was going on. And we flew out of there and we were deported to Istanbul. And so that is a personal account of the experience through my eyes. It's worth, I think, reiterating again that on my prison boat alone, there was over 30 cases of fractured and broken ribs. There was over 10 cases of brutal sexual assault. And there was cases of beaten faces, broken noses, and what's most important, I think, is that every single one of us was treated to a detailed, efficient, systematic torture and abuse. It was evident from the very beginning that this was highly planned. It was not spontaneous. It was highly detailed. It was also deeply sickening because the entire experience felt sort of like a training for new torturers and a training for new guards and soldiers. And what disgusted me is that as I heard my friends being raped and tasered in the shipping container, not only was it hard to hear that, but I realized that what they were doing to us was sort of probably a practice for them of what they were going to do on Palestinians next week or something. And that was especially difficult. In Ketziad, there was tons of Arabic graffiti. I found blood on the wall, and it was deeply unsettling to realize that what was being done to us was a sort of mild procedural training for the Israeli occupation to test out some techniques for young guards and soldiers that they would then use far more brutally next week on Palestinian prisoners and Palestinians in Gaza. So if I can end with a personal comment, I think the entire experience, though it was horrific, it did nothing more than confirm my belief that people are capable of astonishing courage and compassion under the worst circumstances. I was together most of the time with my friends, my comrades, and people who were complete strangers to me, but because of the situation, we were thrown together and we had to care for one another as much as we could. We had to huddle together in the cold on hard floor. We had to care for those who were sick and injured. And we laughed, we cried, and we were defiant. And so I'm completely astonished and inspired by all of the people I met who in the flotilla who had to go through that experience. But more so, I'm inspired by the fact that I only received a fraction of the kind of treatment Palestinians have to go through, and I only experienced it for 4 days. And at the end of it, I'd been on hunger strike for 4 days. I hadn't slept for weeks, and for 4 days straight, I had been completely awake the entire time. And I realized, I said to myself, if I can't stand this anymore, if I can't stand the uncertainty, the beatings, the dragging, just imagine what it would mean to not be able to dream about going home, not be able to know that I'd be flying back to my home country, I'd be safe, I'd get to embrace my loved ones, never being able to look forward to that. Because for Palestinians imprisoned in those dungeons, this is their entire life. Even if they're quote unquote freed from illegal detention, they'd be sent back to Gaza, which is nothing but an open air prison, which is a description that even Israeli politicians have used. To live in Gaza is, I understand a fraction of what it feels like or must feel like, because for me, it felt like constantly, you'd never know whether in 5 minutes you'd still be alive or you'd still be standing, or whether I'd be on the ground, whether I'd be raped, tortured, beaten, or whether I'd be murdered. I had no idea from 1 minute to the next. And so to live like that every day of your life is, it's monstrous, it's horrible, but the word that the Global Samud Flotilla chose as its title, Samud, means steadfastness, and it means collective courage. And so I can only imagine for Palestinians who have to live in Gaza, who fashion swings out of rubble, and who care for one another under the most extreme conditions, and who try and still make each other laugh. And through all that, it's the most unbelievable samud, the most unbelievable courage. because I know, having gone through those 4 days, it's unimaginable to me to think about those 4 days being extended to my entire life. And so I'm completely inspired through this experience by the Palestinians, most fundamentally.
Thank you, Sebastian, for sharing what was obviously a very difficult experience, and for having the courage and the wherewithal to be so composed and share with us in detail your experiences. So we are joined by Sebastian Tow, his mom Anita, Karen DeVito, and John Turnbull, who had been on 2 previous flotillas, and we'll bring them into the conversation. We're also joined by Dr. Heidi Matthews, whose area of interest and scholarship intersects with this. And I'd like to bring you in, Heidi, into this conversation, if you may. Please share with us some of the thoughts that were going through your head as you were listening to Sebastian. Of course, you've heard this kind of testimony before. Is there anything new and different in this particular iteration? And just in general, what would you say? What are your comments upon hearing Sebastian?
Thank you. And thank you, Sebastian, for sharing and for participating in this most recent mission. Yeah, I think clearly the degree of violence and abuse that was inflicted on this most recent mission is an intensification of the violence and abuse that has been inflicted on previous missions, most recently the mission in September and October of 2025. That being said, I'm also entirely unsurprised by this intensification for a number of reasons. I think the writing was on the wall in the fall with reports coming back from participants at that time about various levels of violence, including sexual violence that occurred in the fall, including deprivation of food and water and essential medicines, including severe physical violence, including similar patterns where racialized individuals were subjected to more extreme violence than those who would have been perceived as white. So similar patterns to the fall, although I do think there's been an intensification. Part of the explanation for that, to my mind, is the impunity that has followed from each of the flotilla missions over the past decade and a half now. Most recently, the fall mission, but also many, many years of missions in the past. So, during the fall mission, I can tell you that Canadian participants did have consular visits. They spent a bit longer in Ketziot prison than this time around. I think the video that Ben-Gvir himself shared sparked such an intense and immediate global outrage that Israel was keen to have participants deported as soon as they possibly could. Last time around, folks spent several more days on average in detention. Yeah, I've almost lost my train of thought here, but to say that, yes, so the global outrage intensified following Ben-Gvir's video, and I think it became politically impossible to do otherwise. I do think states became engaged in a way that we haven't seen before. And so, Canadian, I was starting to recount this, Canadian consular staff met with Canadians in Ketziot prison. They heard about abuse at that time. They heard about deprivation of water and medicines. So Canada was also on notice about the nature of the abuse that would be likely to follow. And there's no evidence that any kind of serious diplomatic effort or legal effort was made on the part of the Canadian government to either address violations in the fall and to prevent their recurrence in the course of this most recent mission. So I want to be clear here that as much as we're talking about liability on the part of the State of Israel and its government officials, there are very serious reasons to be concerned about our own government's role in creating the conditions under which this kind of violence can take place, as the role of other Western governments and clearly as well. So just to note that. And I also want to recall 2010. So in the past, Israel has used lethal force against flotilla participants. 10 Turkish volunteers were killed on board the Mavi Marmara. 9 were killed during the attack. 1 died subsequently from their wounds. This actually led to an extended series of litigation interventions at the International Criminal Court. That case is known as the Comoros case. The Union of the Comoros was one of the states that had flagged one of the vessels, part of the flotilla at that time. And so that was 16 years ago now, for a variety of sort of complicated reasons that in that case did not proceed to investigation. The Office of the Prosecutor determined, as part of its internal assessment, that the gravity threshold that is required for it to proceed with an investigation was not met. You know, this was met with requests by, I see some head shaking, this was met with requests by the court to revisit that decision, and it went on for many, many years, but ultimately ended up leading to the investigation never happening. So the preliminary investigation being closed and an official investigation not being open. And so the impunity, in other words, extends beyond the actions of national governments with respect to their obligations protecting their own citizens who participate in these missions, but also, arguably within the realm of international institutions that we want to turn to when we're thinking about protecting human rights in these moments. And there's been a lot of fanfare and applause for the actions of the current prosecutor at the ICC in requesting and having issued arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant. But just to note that there's a long and complicated and not at all straightforward history, even within the ICC itself, in terms of ineffectiveness in getting any kind of accountability for criminality associated with the flotilla itself. So it's this for whatever reason, we see this global outcry now. We can speculate about why that is, but this violence is not new, was entirely foreseeable, and until now, Western governments have done little to nothing to effectively address it. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for sharing that bit of analysis. I would like to now move the discussion into future steps, into forward steps. And but before doing that, I would like to invite Karen and John, both who were on 2 previous flotillas, to share about, and I'm going to ask you to do it this way, if you don't mind. I'm going to ask you to share about the kinds of work that you have been doing since you have experienced that. Karen, you and I were talking earlier about networking and growing and building, and that I think you had mentioned to me that this is something that flotilla participants carry the rest of their lives. It's not just one journey or one sail. So would the 2 of you like to share some of the works that you have been doing over the last number of years after having this experience of being on the flotilla, getting arrested, getting deported, etc. yourselves? What have you been working on now, these days, in terms of extending that work? And maybe I could ask Karen to start, and then John can follow. Karen, you're muted. So, yeah, we're just, okay, good. That's okay. We're pre-recording, so we'll have lots of time to adjust all of this. So no worries, Karen. Just Just find your unmute button. It should be up at the top of the window. You might see a mic icon on the top of this window in the middle somewhere. No? How about we let John go, and then Karen, you figure it out, and then you can join in. Yeah, let's do that then. So I'll start with John maybe and ask him while Karen is figuring out her technical, getting back on the mic, as it were. So John, please share with us.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And let me say first, thank you to Sebastian for that testimony. It evoked both emotional responses from me, and I'm going to say right here that my experience was far, far gentler than yours. I'd like to just say something, but before I talk about what we're doing now, Karen and myself, I'd like to say that there's an interesting trajectory here in the Israeli response to these flotillas, about which I have had periods of skepticism, as I'm sure you will in future. The Mavi Marmara incident, and I'll point out that one of those victims, who was one of the people killed, who Heidi referenced, who was also a US citizen, as Karen is, as I am not. But I'll say that the initial response to the Mavi Marmara was idiotic militarism, dropping from helicopters and shooting people. It was obviously a disaster for Israel at the time. They recovered from that disaster into a period in which they believed rightly that they had a pretty good lock on Western media. My experience with Western media has demonstrated that to my satisfaction. And so we retreated fairly gently, as I suggested earlier. They're now in a position where there's nothing left but cruelty, and that cruelty has led them into a trap, and thank goodness that trap is beginning to close. So we have to now close it. So the work that I'm doing, and I'm speaking personally here, is scattered and various, and I hope comes together in some kind of presentable form. I'm working on a documentary. My background is technical. I joined Tech for Palestine, an organization of disgusted tech entrepreneurs who broke off from the venture capital tech game and said, we're going to devote our time and our money, more consequentially, to Palestinian human rights. And they've done a very good job on that. They've had all sorts of successful projects. Mine is my project with them is a bit unusual for them. I was starting out to trace weapons and had a little bit of success with that, but realized it was already being done quite well. And so I thought to myself, what if I wrote a story about this that started with the murder, like crime stories do, and worked its way back through the evidence to the perpetrators, who are, of course, in the United States and Western Europe and Canada, building weapons and making a living with them. In addition to all the politicians and lobbyists, of course. That idea got some attention that I didn't expect on a video call like this, and I was suddenly working with two filmmakers in the UK, and I'm now researching and writing the first of our episodes, which is about the Amir incident, where the child was killed at the GHF so-called aid sites. And I can give you some detail about that later if you wish. So that's what I'm doing. Karen and I always have the feeling that we're not doing enough, and we're not, hanging on to it. Of course, we're kidding on, so this has become more difficult for us. We participate in the demonstrations where we live in Nanaimo on the West Coast, not far from you, I understand. Perhaps you can join us one of these days. We have done various operations or various activities to take people like you with a personal experience and to present them to naive audiences, naive but usually sympathetic audiences, and I think this is the most valuable thing. We have ideas and plans for how the flotilla operation, and of course boats are part of my expertise. Unfortunately, I was the captain who had to say, no, I'm not the captain. I've given up. As you were trying to furl the sails, I knew how to do it too, and I pretended I didn't know. the job here is to take these legitimate and authoritative and confident experiences because they're so personal. You tell this story so well and so confidently because it happened to you. Our job is to take these stories to the naive audiences that elect our current governments, and as Heidi points out, that's where things are going to change if they do. And Karen, it's up in the right-hand corner on your machine. It's a little microphone, and you're going to have to click it.
Got it.
Good.
I've been so many Zoom meetings, and it's somewhere else, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I appreciate the mention of the Mavi because, for one thing, our friend Kevin Nish was on that ship with several hundred people, and he took photographs of what was happening, and he took photographs of the people who were murdered, and the treatment of those people was harsh when they were captured. Same thing, stress positions, etc. And he made a show of throwing his camera overboard in front of the Israeli Navy, but he had hidden the chip in his mouth, and he endured several days of prison like that, kneeling for hours. And when he was deported to Istanbul, he gave that camera chip to the Turkish government, and that is how they sued Israel. He came home to some scorn from some media. He had a radio interview with CBC. He was to do a television interview the next day, and on his way to the studio in Toronto, he got a phone call that his interview had been canceled. And who was interviewed that day? A spokesperson for the IDF. So that is how it was then. And our first flotilla was 2011. We tried to sail from Greece and were stopped. We sailed in secret out of Turkey after that. And we knew what had happened on the Mavi, especially because Kevin had, we heard from Kevin what happened. So we had trained for about 3.5 weeks in Greece for various eventualities. You know, buying onions and masks for the tear gas, and buying adult diapers for being the health instructor. That didn't happen to us. We had brutality light. We had what you'd call sexual harassment, but not actual physical. Not quite to the degree. Some people were strip searched. It was a similar experience, but nowhere near, Sebastian, what you endured. And the way you tell it is very moving. It's very moving. And of course, we all have, John and I am sure we both had psychological moments hearing what you went through, because we were on the edge of that as well. I think my involvement has been, we both worked with the flotilla committees of the Canadian Committee and the Freedom Flotilla Committee. We've have colleagues in other countries, because when we sailed on the 2018 flotilla, we started in Copenhagen, and they needed us as sailors because we're both sailors. So we sailed to freedom through Europe, stopping at ports, meeting people, talking with people and politicians. And then I left the ship in Palermo, and John captained it from there on. We took turns getting each other out of prison. That was our involvement. But since during that time, from 2011 and even before, we would go to people's living rooms after the flotilla. We would talk about we would team up with people with other experiences, like harvesting olives and getting beaten up for that in the West Bank. And we would go and talk to people who were curious about it, academics, ordinary people. It was really just a person-to-person involvement. Of course, we were involved with organizations in Vancouver when we lived there. We would attend protests. We would do what we can. We brought Roger Waters to speak in a cathedral downtown Vancouver. We were shocked when he finally said yes. We had 4 days to prepare. We filled that cathedral with 1,200 people. I brought films to the film festivals. I brought films to the Indepth. We sold out. The Zionists would be outside protesting. The JDL showed up one time. It's been quite an interesting ride to be involved to this degree, and we do what we can. And yes, we are getting up in years, and we can't skip around the deck like we used to. We will help prepare ships. We were in the UK preparing a ship which has not yet sailed. We don't know what the plan will be, but it needed a lot of work, and we worked on that. While we were there, we met some young people from Palestine Action who had just won a court case for their freedom of speech in the UK, which, you know, it's been quite shut down. And we gave them a tour of the ship, and one of them, these beautiful young people, one of them said, "I know now that I will resist the occupation and I will support Palestine until my last breath." And they all said the same thing. And I said, I feel exactly the same way, although I am on a shorter runway than you are. They all threw their arms around me. And it was so, this is what gives me hope. People like you, Sebastian, we pass the torch to you. We pass the torch to generations. We are going to try to live to see Palestine free. We're going to do our best. We're going to do our best. We'll try for 100, you know? Maybe it will happen in that time. So thank you so much. And thanks for the opportunity of joining you. And maybe it would be great to be able to have you come over here. We've got a group of freedom sailors, younger freedom sailors, coming this weekend to gather together. They were on the Honduras mission at our home. And maybe we can find some speaking venues. But we participate in the rallies as we can. We're participating in the recent apartheid-free communities effort here where we live. We live on a tiny island near Nanaimo. Anyway, you are most welcome. I know it's going to take a little while for all of this to settle in for you, but we will, I hope, get together in person at some point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. To both you and John, it's an honor to be meeting you. And, absolutely, you have my email, and I would love to organize to do anything and everything we can. And thank you so much.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you, and it's such a joy to hear all of you, Heidi and John and Karen. And I would say what I've learned from, I also have a daughter who's 28 who has been going to protests and, you know, being involved, and she spoke at a rally in Vancouver on Saturday just before Sebastian came home, and I've learned so much through them. So even what you're saying, passing the torch, I'm on the edge of this, but I've learned so much and I want to be a part of it. But I'm so inspired, and part of why I think they're so successful at this point in the rise of Instagram and TikTok, and they've watched the genocide unfold on their phones, and that's what has brought such a fire in them. So I feel such hope for this cause with this next generation, hugely. I wanted to say that. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Anita, for jumping in, because I actually did want to cycle. I wanted to cycle back to you and ask you to share with us, you know, how this journey has been for you. I mean, from when Sebastian first told you, maybe, to your trepidations, to your support, and then to witness also what he went through, but then to have him come back. I mean, what a journey this has been for you, as well as for everyone else watching, but especially for you as a mom, to see this courage and yet support it and know the dangers. I mean, how did it sit with you?
Thank you. I have watched the news. Ironically, my husband died of a brain tumor in 2010, and I actually remember the news of that ship being, those people being killed. But of course, I was in my own terrible time at that time. Sebastian was only 8 and his sister was 12. And I have watched the news since then. I try to follow everything I can, even though I feel like I've learned an enormous amount in the last few months. So I'm catching up. But watching his and his sister's increased activism, certainly on this subject, has helped me. And it certainly did help me when he told me initially that he'd been interviewing for it. And of course, my initial reaction was trepidation as a mother, knowing what had been done, reading the accounts of, even I went down and read all the accounts of what they did to Greta Thunberg in the fall. And because most of these brave people, they come off and they meet the press, and they are so excellent at sticking to the point of redirecting everything back to the Palestinians, which I admired so much. But I thought, well, what really did happen to them? And then I did some digging and read all about what really happened to them. And so I knew, but I also knew his resolve in everything he's done in his life. When he is 100% into something, he's 100% into it. So I knew that there was not a lot of dissuading him. And he's also a grown man. So I wanted to support him for both of my kids in whatever they want to do. And I had just been working in the downtown East Side as an actor for a theater down there. And every day, you know, you walk by people on the street, young men on the street with their no shoes and their faces in the cement, and you know, on all sorts of troubled pasts that have led them to being in addiction. And so then my son comes and tells me that he wants to do this amazing thing. And I think with that context, it was even more in my mind that I would 100% support him, in the sense of, look, he's going and doing something. It sort of increased my compassion for the young men I was passing on the street every day, and also increased my desire to send my son off to do something with his life that's important. And I have to say, the week we knew that when he was intercepted, I never watched it on the live stream. I never saw his boat being intercepted, which was nice. I watched all the other ones being intercepted, so I think I was spared a little bit actually watching him being intercepted. And then my daughter was with me this whole week. We were both of us not having to work, so we were just, you know, dealing with all of the media that was coming our way. And I felt like we were a team going through it together with a lot of support from our community. And that was really helpful. But every day, of course, we just had no idea what was going to happen next, until even watching the live stream of them coming off the airplanes. I don't think I was quite ready to see them, people going on stretchers and in wheelchairs and limping and in prison clothes. And that was particularly hard to witness. But again, I never saw him. It was only till later that other people sent me screenshots. They had seen him. I'm watching and watching, and then suddenly my phone lit up, and it was a call from him. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in a week or more, probably. So I would say, as a mother, it's been an emotional journey, but one I could not be more proud of, because there's nothing like watching your children do good things in the world. I have, in my time as an artist, tried very much to especially get behind causes that have to do with Indigenous folks, and that has been a big learning thing for me. And I took Sebastian to his first march when you were in your teens. I just feel like I've done very, very little, and now they are doing so much more, and I'm very pleased by that. I think one of the most moving parts for me on Sunday when he arrived in Vancouver were all of the Palestinian folks that waited until all the other friends and family supporters left to speak personally to Sebastian. And there was a young family with 2 little kids that had come, and they waited and waited and waited to take a picture with Sebastian. And that was incredibly moving to me, to hug that mother and to weep together. And yeah, like everybody of my community says, nothing makes it more personal than when it's someone you know. So I could not be more pleased that this someone I know intimately is now affecting so many other people, to turn the attention back to this situation that we see. And like Heidi, you said that our governments are so complicit in, but I'm hoping that through this we are continuing to break the barriers, that people can see and understand that this needs to change. So thanks for letting me speak. Thanks for letting Sebastian speak.
Are you kidding? It's it's our pleasure. I mean, we are really happy to speak with you and connect with you and hear your stories and eventually be able to share them with other folks that are interested. And so, you know, Anita, your part of the story is central as well. You know, I'm sure that that you have raised Sebastian in such a way that he was able to take this choice, that he was able to make this decision, knowing that you would still be supporting him. I mean, that's just incredible. I'm getting very emotional as I'm looking at you guys, and I'm thinking of this. And what a service your family and all of you, even Karen and John and Heidi Matthews also joining us. I mean, you guys are really doing a lot of service in talking about this issue and experiencing it yourselves in commitments to continuing it going. I mean, our job is just to offer the space where you can come and you can share with us and with the communities. I mean, that's a very simple thing that we are doing. And if it wasn't for you guys, you know, we'd be out of work in a way, although we volunteer. It's not work, but you know what I mean. You know, we've been going and having this conversation now. It's getting on. I'm conscious of your time. I'm conscious of your day and the energies that you've already put into this. So let me close by saying, if there's any final last words, we'd love to hear them, but also to put it out there as an invite that we would love to continue. I mean, this story is not just about you know, Canadian individuals who have gone, but it has such a resonance in our society, and especially now that we see that Israel is getting even harder in its response, and that international states are now coming up to the fore, at least hopefully. They should have actually, the states. Not the states, but the countries themselves of their citizens should have escorted these flotillas. And I know a lot of other people are making the same comment, and this has been in discussion for 10 or more years, that they just wait and see, let Israel go ahead and, you know, have these flagrant violations, and then their citizens come home, and then things get buried. I'm sure Heidi has seen this pattern. We've all seen this pattern. But it's time, I think, that is changing. I think public opinion is changing, and the work of folks like you are certainly making that happen. So it's a long way to close out. But before that, I wanted to just ask if there is any last words, please, and that we intend to reach back to you and delve further into this conversation. Yeah, I'll start with Heidi first and circle back to Sebastian last. How's that? So Heidi?
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think it's really important to reinforce that this does appear to be an inflection point, both in terms of the global conversation on Palestine and Israel's unlawful occupation, Canada and in Canada and around the world. And so we have seen, you know, over the last couple of days, a shift in the way that our officials, Prime Minister Carney, Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand, are talking about what's happened and their responses. And so we get initially a response from Prime Minister Carney, you know, really doing exactly what Netanyahu himself had done, which was to hold out Ben-Gvir as the problem. Right? I've said this in other contexts, but to hold out Ben-Gvir as the issue, as opposed to the issue being the unlawful occupation itself, Israel's continued presence in Gaza, including the existence of the naval blockade, all constitute infringements of Israel's international legal obligations, which were articulated in the summer of 2024 by the International Court of Justice, just to be clear about that. So we had this, you know, very disappointing initial response from the Prime Minister, but as soon as the story took up momentum, we see additional statements both by the Prime Minister and Anita Anand herself. Most recently, Anand is, you know, essentially outright accusing Israel of violating the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, which is, you know, that starts to all sound a little bit technical now, but in denying consular access. And just to ask Sebastian, I didn't hear you talk about receive, so I'm just assuming that you were denied consular access from the point of detention throughout your whole detention. Yeah, okay. Right, so the denial of consular accesses. That is not only, of course, creates conditions under which Sebastian and the other participants have their human rights violated, but it is an internationally wrongful act. And what that means is that Israel has harmed the state of Canada, right, itself, not just the participants, but has harmed Canada as a sovereign state under international law by violating the convention in that way, in addition to the entirely separate question of the torture and abuse that was inflicted as well, which also, again, constitutes individual human rights violations and crimes, but also wrongs committed against Canada as a state. So really now, I think in terms of what the public and folks who are interested in doing something, right, what we need to do is to continue to put pressure on our government to take meaningful action. You know, the most basic thing that Canada should be doing at this point is demanding an official apology from the state of Israel for all of the violations that I've just mentioned. There are lots of other actions as well, including actual reparation, guarantees of non-repetition, and other forms of redress that can be sought, you know, up to and including a decision to, for example, to remove sovereign immunity and allow criminal or civil proceedings to take place in Canada for these violations. So there are lots of concrete steps that the government must take if it's actually serious about redressing the harm to its own citizens and to itself as a state. And I say all of that not because the focus should be on the harm to the participants, which is very, very serious, but it, of course, was undertaken in virtue or by view of a much larger objective, which is to put the spotlight on Palestine and to end the unlawful occupation, right? But we get there by states being willing to actually take the legal and diplomatic actions that are required to vindicate violations for their own citizens and against themselves as a state as well. And so continued pressure on government officials to take meaningful diplomatic and legal action at this point is absolutely essential if we want to ensure that this really does become a meaningful inflection point in isolating Israel nationally and globally, such that the occupation can finally come to an end.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for those very important points. And for folks listening, this is a good time, isn't it, to get involved? I mean, this is a good time. There's a variety of things that individuals can do at this time to help strengthen this cause and to help the Canadian government understand that it should take a moral stance and do the right thing. Karen and John, may I ask you to please share with us some last words on this conversation?
Yeah, let me say, I'm butting in here. Sorry, Karen. I want to just express my appreciation for Heidi's ability to have both the legal goods on the problem, but also to have personally witnessed the drones threatening the anchorage in Tunis. I think there aren't very many experts of her kind who can bring both experiences to their assessment of the situation. I want to thank Anita, too, for reminding me that the best thing you can do bringing up a child is to take them to a demo. Thank you for doing that. And I will say just in closing that the next target for us could be SIFTA, the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, which comes up for reassessment every few years and which should be cancelled.
Well, I can only echo what John said. I'm really impressed by these folks who've gathered together here today. Yeah. Well, you know, I used to take my godchild to the demonstrations against the Vietnam War. And I took her for old time's sake, when the big demonstration against the Iraq War in 2003, before it started, we went for old time's sake. She was a 30-year-old adult at that point. She was terrified when I went on the flotilla, terrified. She cried, "I don't want you to die." But of course, I had already committed. And she wrote a piece about my participation that won a National Magazine Award. I said, well, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And she ended it by saying, well, I don't want to get on a boat and, but what can I do? I could make sandwiches for homeless people. That's what she suggested to people way back in 2011. But right now, I would say what ordinary people can do is visit our government representatives. We visited our MP, Tamara Cronus's office, with a group of students from Palestine a week ago Saturday. And there happened to be a woman among us who is a friend of your family. John, if you can remember her name, that would be great. She's a friend of, I think, Sebastian's sister. And we went to Tamara Cronus's office, and she's not particularly friendly to anything Palestine. And we went during office hours, and they locked the doors and closed the blinds before we got there. And it was the middle of the day, locked up, tight as a drum. So we did some videos and posted them. And your friend, we recorded a message directly from her to Tamara Cronus. You probably have seen it, asking what she's going to do about Sebastian and that he must be released. So little did we know we'd be meeting you like this. It's wonderful. Thank you so much. And yes, the torch has passed. And yes, we're so proud of everybody who participated. Yes. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Sebastian. And thank you, Heidi.
So I'll leave it to you guys, Anita and Sebastian. For now, please share some thoughts and last words.
Sure. I'll close by saying, first, thank you again. It's been an honor to speak to all of you. Karen and John, I'll be in contact with you so we can continue and organize. And it's so glad to have contacts here on the Lower Mainland in BC. And Heidi, I'd love to speak to you more, because the GSF as a total organization internationally, as well as our 12 delegates here in Canada, we're going to be using our testimonies, and I would love to speak to you to get your expertise on international law to talk about how we're going to bring it to trial. And I'll close with this, that as was said, this is all for Palestine. And I mean, in the last few days alone in Gaza, a 6-year-old girl has been murdered. A 15-year-old girl was murdered, died from her injuries in a makeshift hospital. And a 25-year-old photographer in Gaza was also murdered. All of them in airstrikes in a refugee camp. And over the last month, settler attacks in the West Bank continue to escalate. The genocide continues and the apartheid continues. And what we're doing here, what I want to do with my case and with my experience now, is just be one hammer among many as we try and shape out hopefully a better world that begins with, for me personally, hopefully taking Israel to court and using my place now in the public sphere, as well as my place in the organization in GSF, to continue to put pressure on the Canadian and American government until, at least I could say the Canadian case, until we reach that place where finally they can put sanctions on the Israeli regime and cut ties, remove their embassies, do the bare minimum of what they should be doing after their own citizens have been tortured and after they have been complicit with the genocide for up to 3 years. We all have a part, and it is a great moment to seize, and it is an absolute necessity that we continue to act, because children and youth and men and women and innocent people are dying as we speak. And it is absolutely necessary that we continue to use this moment to pressure our governments and to mobilize citizen movements in every way possible, with all means possible, and any means necessary. And we can do this. Thank you.
Anita, look, this would not have been possible if it wasn't for you way back when. And we'd also like to invite you to share some thoughts as we close this.
Oh, goodness. I don't know that I can say anything more on top of the eloquence of my son here, but I would just say thank you for letting us share. I'm grateful to be the mother of young people and the witness of many of my friends' young people and children and this generation, as I've said, that are passionate about this. And it gives me hope for the future, gives me hope for a future where some justice can occur, and certainly justice for the Palestinians. And that's my hope, and I will keep working too. And so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So we've been joined today with Sebastian Tow, his mom Anita, Karen DeVito, John Turnbull, two previous guests that have also been on two flotillas in the past, and Dr. Heidi Matthews joined us in this conversation as well for their critical analysis of the situation. And you know, we're going to invite you all back again to talk more about the different aspects of this issue, and then we can dive deeper into it, and perhaps also, Sebastian, find some of your other colleagues on this particular one if they're open to it, and we can join back. And we'd love to follow your work and support you, all of you, everybody included in this is doing fantastic, amazing work and have been doing for so many years. It's really nice to meet you in this way for the first time, and as I said, we're really looking forward to again. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences and analysis with us. Thank you.
I'd run out of paper. The ink just sits as outline letters on the counter. And if I touch the words, will they lift on my wrist, travel farther? If I had hindsight, I'd warn me not to be eager. Be careful what you write, be misconstrued and lose the fight. They will assume what's not inside, 'cause that's what they do. I'll see you soon. Don't know what you look like when you return, or will you turn into change face? I'll know it's you, 'cause I created you. See you soon. Look how you grew. Sure how they'll take it, but when I hear it back, at least I know I made it. There's no quality of life looking through others. I know I'll let it go, 'cause all opinions seem to differ. I'll see you soon. Don't know what you look like when you return, or will you turn into change face? I'll know it's you, 'cause I created you. See you soon. Look how you grew. Look how you
You've been listening to The Rational on Vancouver Coop-Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. Current affairs and analysis from a people of color perspective. It is good to have you with us. Please take care of yourselves and of one another.